Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. And tonight we have Art the Clown himself, David Howard Thornton. David, thank you for being our guest. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It is our pleasure here at Dead Talk Live to be talking to you. There's a lot of excitement for tonight's show, and people want to hear what you have to say. So let's get right to the nitty gritty. Okay, what I want to know is when you first met Damien
Mhm.
Leone, how did that conversation go of him describing this psychotic killing clown to you?
Oh my gosh, yeah. That my our first real discussion about him was when I was in the makeup chair for the makeup test the first time, and because I'm an actor and I'm like, okay, I want to know everything about this guy's background, his motivations, all that kind of stuff. And Damon just kind of like, well, I
Our first
really
real
don't
discussion about him
know.
was when I was in the makeup chair. Sorry about that. Okay.
Yeah, also okay. So yeah, so he's like, why don't we just like figure a lot of that out together? So that's what we did. So we've spent all this time really creating more of his background and everything. Because I think for like All Hallows Eve, he just thought he looked kind of creepy and stuff like that. And he
Mm-hmm.
like for part, for the Terrifier movie. I mean, he's like, okay, I guess we need to really start fleshing out his character more. So that's what we started to do together in developing stuff. So yeah, it's been fun actually being able to really create the character with him in a lot of ways.
And did you have a lot of input, your own creative input on how to flesh out the character?
Yeah, he let me have some input as well. Especially, I wanted to go more into the physicality of the character, like especially since he is a clown. I wanted to bring more of that kind of aspect to him, the clowning aspect, because that was actually something they even mentioned they wanted someone to bring to it in the casting notice for
Mm-hmm.
him. I was like, well, that's my area of expertise is doing a lot of physical comedy, so I wanted to bring that aspect to the character, and I think it worked pretty well.
It did. It worked out great, and you guys have created, like I've told Damien, the new famous, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees of the 21st century. Now,
Yeah.
Damien is a makeup artist,
Yes.
so he was the one that created the look for you. What was your reaction sitting in that makeup chair and he was done, and you got to see through yourself what Art the Clown was going to look like?
Oh, I loved it. I went nuts. I was like, what I did. I'm used to a lot of crazy makeup jobs too, because I did a lot of children's theater growing up, and I also like toured for like 5 years with How the Grinch Stole Christmas the musical. So we had a lot of crazy makeup in that as well. So what I like to do is like when I get a new makeup job like that, I like to go and sit in front of a mirror for a while and make faces. So that's what I did. I went to the bathroom and just they probably thought I was doing something else in the bathroom. But I was like, no, I'm in here just making faces. They're like, yeah, sure you are.
So to help the development of art, a lot of actors do this. Did you create a backstory for art to help you represent him on screen?
I did, but I did that with Damien as well. And we keep on adding more and more to that as well as we go along. So it's been fun. But I basically, though, just started off with like just one of the lines that the crazy cat lady, homeless woman says is like he does this because he thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
Is fun for him, and
Hmm.
that's I was like, oh, that's his whole motivation right there. He's the anti clown in a way where clowns are supposed to bring joy and happiness to people. He's bringing misery and pain to other people for his own amusement.
Yeah, he's a sadist. There's no other way
Yeah.
around it. Now, you've mentioned in a prior interview you have a love for improv.
Yes.
Uh, And was that part of what you brought to art as well? And did Damien allow a lot of room, little room for improv with the
Oh,
clown?
definitely. Definitely. Yeah, that's definitely what I brought to it. I would say more than anything else was a lot of it because I like to play around. I like to experiment and see what I can come up with, especially when it comes to comedy. I think
Hmm.
there's so many things you can just, see what you can do in the moment. And we had some happy moments like that happen on set in both films. Like the most well-known one, I think, in part one was with me flicking the bird to Samantha when she stabs me in the foot. That was me just goofing around on set, and they caught it on film after they had said cut, and I was like, they thought that was funny. But yeah, that's something Damien has done a lot, especially in part two, because he when he wrote part one, he didn't know me, he didn't know my style. So he discovered that part of me when we were filming part one, like especially with the scene where I'm making all the faces and everything like that. That's in the pizzeria scene, and he wrote more of those kind of scenes in part two for me, just experiment and play with. Where he's basically wrote a bare bones description of the scene, and he's like, okay, Art's in this environment, and he plays with everything around him. And we're just like, okay, we're just going to figure all that out when we get there on set and see what you had to work with. I'm like, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And I love those kind of scenes.
Awesome.
A lot of different takes that, aren't even used. I would say the majority of the takes where I was just playing around don't get used, but I gave them so many options just to go with.
That is so amazing. Now, I've told this to almost every member of Terrifier that I've spoken to, and as fans, we love the fact on how Damien pays tribute to a lot of old-time classic horror movies. And I even told this to Damien himself, the quality of the movie, the film, a little bit of grain added here and there also gives it sort of that 80s, 90s feel of horror. How do you feel about that aspect of the movie?
Oh, I love it. Because this is our intention with part one was basically this was our love letter to the slasher genre, especially the films that came out in the 70s and 80s and the heyday of the slashers. That it's when people were really experimenting and see what they could go with, and that's what I'm glad we were able to latch on to, and I think we scratched that itch that a lot of people had, because we were able to scratch that nostalgic itch without trying to be, oh, look how nostalgic we're being at the same time.
Now,
it just felt familiar to people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what a lot of horror fans really loved about it. Now, you guys really pushed the boundaries with the, part one of Terrifier in regards to gore. Poor Catherine. I told her when we met her in September, where I met you as well at the convention in Atlantic City. I told her, Catherine, you suffered the most gruesome on-scene kill I have ever seen in any horror movie. Let's stick with that scene for a second. I mean, poor girl was hanging upside down for, like Damien described it, for hours. How did did you guys talk about it on how you guys were going to work that scene where you literally slice her in half?
Yeah, I think Damien and Catherine talked more about it than me, because I'm just basically there just pretending I'm doing all that kind of stuff. She's doing all the hard work. I'm just having to pretend like I'm actually cutting into her and feeling sorry for her the whole entire time. So I guess that really goes all to her. The real cutting I did was the prosthetic. So,
but you got that prosthetic. Fun. I mean, when you were slicing, did you was that fun? Like, okay, I gotta portray I'm killing a person here, so I'm gonna put everything I have into chopping up this prosthetic person in front of me.
Oh, that was a lot of fun, because I actually got to really saw through that thing, and that saw went through it a lot easier than I was expecting too. So I was like, oh wow. And they're like, don't go through it so fast, Dave. I'm like, sorry.
So going back to the pushing of the boundaries, and you guys pushed so many of them in the first one, when it did come time, and of course part two has not been delivered to the fans yet, and we're all eagerly anticipating it, do you think Damien yourself took it to an even higher level than you guys did in Terrifier?
Oh, by far. I recently got to see the big kill scene that we think is going to top the hacksaw scene, at least in sheer brutality, a few weeks ago, and it's basically about 5-6 minutes of Art just going to town on somebody, and we're showing it all, and it's brutal. I don't imagine we'll be able to get that past a ratings board.
Well, you'd be surprised. You never know.
You never know. But it's pretty gruesome. We've shown it to some of our cast members from part one just to get their reactions, and they all were just like, holy crap. We also showed it to Heather Riker, who does a lot of Q&A sessions at conventions, and
Hmm.
she's a big, huge horror buff herself. And I she basically broke down in tears of happiness by the end of the kill scene. I was like, why are you crying? She's like, I'm just so moved. This is what horror fans want to see. This is amazing. It's brutal as anything, but oh my god, this is what we want to see.
I can't wait to see it. Oh man, I can only imagine.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's gruesome, man. People are gonna be like, dude, you gotta stop. It's like, what's wrong with you guys?
so when Damien first presented you the script of the first one, and you're reading through it, and you're reading through all the kill scenes and what Art has to do,
Mm-hmm.
what were your feelings about that? Do you think it was a little too much, or what?
Well, I'm so used to what I'm usually see in horror films now, where they don't even show the kills most of the time. They
Hmm.
usually zoom out or do it off screen, or you see it in shadow or something like that. You just see it like a blood splatter or something like that. So his description of the hacksaw scene, he wrote everything out what was happening in that, and I was like, okay, cool. This is probably just so for our benefit to know what's going on. And he's like, oh no, 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 we're actually going to show all that. And I was like, holy crap! All right, I'm totally in, because I think that's one thing that's been bothering me a lot with slashers, especially in the past few decades, is they've been so tame. They're trying to play
Hmm.
it safe all the time.
Yeah.
They're so generic. Like the kills are no longer creative, crazy kills
No.
anymore. It's just stab and move on to the next victim. I'm like, God, it's so boring. And
Yeah.
pun intended, art makes an art out of killing, and that's
Exactly.
what I love about it. It's just like that's what I love about his name. Is just like there's so many things you can take from his name, and that's one of the things that there's the art of the kill with him, and that's what I love about it. So this
Absolutely.
is
Yeah.
we're bringing back the creative kills that you've seen in the original slashers, especially those B movie slashers back in the day, where they didn't care what the rating boards were saying; they were going to go crazy.
I
I mean,
took.
look at the movie Brain Dead with the lawnmower scene. It's just
Oh
like, oh
yeah.
my god.
I totally agree with you, and I think that's why what led to the sort of decline of slasher films is because they did tame it too much. And what you
Hmm.
and Damien did with this is you like, you know what? Screw it. Let's just throw it out there and see what it does. And it worked. It
Yeah.
sort of revived this dying subgenre in horror, and it gave it new life. Now, when it comes to art coming out only on Halloween, uh, in your opinion, is that just tribute to the movie Halloween, or is there a reason why art only does this on Halloween night?
I mean, I don't want to spoil too much, but I will say part of it goes with the whole idea that that's the one night a year he can go around dressed like that and
Hmm.
totally blend in with everybody else. No one thinks anything of it, just another guy in a costume.
Okay, that's fair enough. Now, as you're building up this story with, you said yourself and
Hmm.
Damien, the other 364 days out of the year, is Art just a regular person, a psychopath, but we all know that psychopaths can blend into normal society with no problem, and it's just this one night a year that he shows his true colors.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't want to divulge too much,
Okay,
so
okay.
that might be something we tackle in a future film.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah. I will say
Now,
we don't tackle that in part two, so don't expect that in part two yet.
Now, you had one of the most twisted scenes in the first one is where you take off the clown costume and you put on the scalp blonde, Catherine's hair, and you go up and you're sort of doing this sort of like Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs reenactment. As an actor, how did that feel for you just to wear, being almost half naked, wearing that wig with the art face, and just it's all said through movement, body
Yeah.
movement. How difficult and challenging was that for you?
That's a good question. First of all, that wasn't Catherine's body. That was the homeless woman's
Okay,
body
okay.
parts that I was using, though. But that was originally not written to be that way. I was originally just putting the body parts over my costume. And it was about 2 days before we filmed it. Damien approached me while we're in the car. He's like, "So, I got a crazy sick idea for you that you might not like." I'm like, "Okay." It's like how would you feel about being naked and putting all that stuff on? I'm like, oh, because I've always been very self conscious about my body growing up. It's just like because I've always been a really skinny guy and stuff
Hmm.
like that, and so I was like, ah, geez, my first because this was also my first film. I'm like, ah, man, I don't want my first film people seeing my naked ass and stuff like that. But I really thought about it more. I was like, you know what? That is really, really creepy. And
Hmm.
also, Catherine is going out of her way, really, putting herself in a very vulnerable and exposed manner for that one kill scene. I'm like, if she can do that, I can do that. Do this for this scene because, yeah, that will actually add an extra creepy layer to this and just shows how really depraved this character is. That he wouldn't just put this on his costume; he would actually put someone else's body parts on himself and wear it around like that. And I was like, this is great. I'm totally you know what? I'm like, I feel sorry for our crew, but I'm like, I'm in. Let's
No,
do
it
this.
definitely worked, David. I mean, you're right. It added that extra layer to your character. I mean, Damien was brilliant in coming up with that idea,
Hmm.
and you going along with it and doing it, I think it played perfectly
Thank you,
in
thank you.
adding that real creep factor to somebody who
Yeah.
already was pretty damn creepy. Now, clowns in general, are considered scary. I don't like
Hmm.
clowns. I mean, just in particular, it's just something about them. For me, it goes back to the Poltergeist movie with that doll, the clown
Hmm.
doll. And clowns have always been depicted in horror movies. What are your feelings in regards to clown, the creep factor, and horror?
Well, I've actually never really been too creeped out by clowns, oddly enough. It's like the only one that really creeped me out was way back when I was like maybe 2 or 3 years old. I had those Mego figures of the Batman
Yeah.
line, and I had the Joker figure, and he scared me. My mom had to hide him for a little while until I got used to him. That's the only time a clown ever creeped me out. I guess it's because also I kind of grew up with Ronald McDonald, so like
Yes.
so he,
Yes.
I was like, I equated, clowns with, fun, like Ronald McDonald and Bozo. I used to watch the Bozo show all the time. So clowns never really bothered me. I always thought they were amusing and stuff like that. But yeah, I can see why other people would be creeped out, especially by, after it came out. A lot of people were
Hmm.
really freaked out by clowns and stuff. I have good friends that have huge phobias of clowns. They won't even watch Terrifier, even though I'm in it. They're like, yeah, I love you, but no. But I think it comes down to the whole uncanny valley issue where it's like clowns are so close to looking like a human, but they're so exaggerated at the same time. So it's kind of creepy in that way, and especially with horror clowns, it's like 'cause as I said earlier, clowns are supposed to bring happiness and joy to
Hmm.
people, and horror clowns are doing the opposite. And I think that's what really disturbs people more because they're supposed to be fun and innocent, and it's like when you see like what creeps me out are like ghost children and stuff like that, creepy little kids in movies. That because those that's another thing that's supposed to be nice and sweet and innocent,
Hmm.
but anything that you can take something that seems nice and good and you can twist it in a dark way, I think that adds to a creepy factor.
Absolutely. Now, what Terrifier, Art the Clown has done for your career and your popularity is, goes without saying. To let our audience know, I met David this past September in Atlantic City at a horror
Hmm.
convention, and your line stretched around the room. So I mean, you're a very popular guy. How much, since the movie came out and you started doing these conventions, how much has this role changed your life?
Oh, it's been night and day. I was waiting tables for 13 years here in New York, and now I don't have to do that anymore. So that's been great. It was because like Terrifier came out when I was first waiting tables, so it was a very weird thing that I was dealing with at that time because I was going to work and people treating me like crap, just because
Hmm.
they didn't get enough ranch with their salad or
Yeah.
something like that. Things that like are so just infinitesimal, that don't really matter.
Hmm.
And then I come home and I'm answering fan mail. So that was kind of weird, but like once I started doing the conventions, I didn't have to do that anymore, and now I've started doing other films, and I've built up a whole new base of friends. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. It's your life changes just like that. Eh,
Total change in blink of an eye. It's
How
like now I'm not struggling to pay my bills anymore.
exactly? How do you? Because you do a lot of them. Do you like going into these conventions and meeting your fans, and you have a lot of them, and talking to them, and hearing, just how much they love watching Art the Clown and Terrifier? How does that make you feel?
Oh, I love it. I mean, I used to go to conventions before, this all happened for me. So I used to go and cosplay as Joker a lot. So like, especially when I see someone cosplaying art, I go nuts over that. Yeah, I've seen some really creative ones
Oh
too.
wow,
And it just because I know, with cosplay, you do that because you love the character, and it takes a lot of these are homemade costumes too. So knowing that someone put all that time and effort to make that just so
hmm
they could show up for that day dressed as me, and I'm like, that's so cool.
it is.
And I love that whole aspect of meeting because it's the fans that have made this movie what it is. It's like we didn't have a studio system behind us pushing us and doing all this publicity for us. It's the fans that got the word of mouth out there about it,
hmm
and it's the fans that really funded part two. And so I love having that ability to actually interact with the fans in that capacity. I'm saying, and like Damien's the same way. We and so are the girls. When we go to these, we don't just go to the table during the day and go and call it a night when the con's finished. We go and hang out afterwards, usually at the parties and all that kind of stuff too, which I think it's a lot of fun. It's just
It
it can
is.
be overwhelming at times, but it's a good type of overwhelming. So I'm very grateful to be able to do it.
When I had Samantha on, Samantha told me that the first time she met you was you in costume. Is that accurate?
Yes, she didn't know what I looked like for several, probably a few months. It was like one day she showed up on set the same time I showed up on set, and I started talking to her, and she didn't even realize it was me. It was so funny. And like Samantha, she's like, because she was kind of like, why, dude, why are you talking to me? I don't know you. I'm like, Samantha,
It's
it's me,
all,
Dave.
yeah, yeah.
She's like, holy crap, that's what you look like.
Now, the whole Terrifier crew, and I've met almost all of you behind and in front of the camera. You guys seem like you've become one big family. Is that true?
Yeah. Oh, definitely, definitely. It's just, and it's so funny because I'm part of two different casts from the movies, and so it's like, and both casts have been great. Everybody gets along so well, the cast and crew. It's not just the cast itself, the crew and the cast bond, because we're such a small company, so everybody gets along, and we're in the trenches together. We're all
hmm
suffering together, and because usually we've all been in these miserable environments because we're usually filming in the winter. So it's one of those things, like it's like we've gone to war together. So there's that kind of bond with each other after all this, and so we all get along so well. We just did Chiller Theater
hmm
in Parsippany 2 weeks ago, and that was the first time we had most of the cast there from Terrifier. And a lot of those people, that was their first time doing a convention as well, and so that was so
Oh, yeah.
much fun. I was like, I was so happy to see everybody else being introduced to this world that I've been part of for 3 years. I'm like, welcome to this life, and it's
hmm
just saying, not just how fans would come up to me. I was so happy to see the fans going up to all of them and getting their autographs and everything like that, and just the love going around. We had all had so much fun hanging out together because I haven't seen some of these people in like 2 or 3 years.
Now, horror fans are the best fans in the world, right?
Oh, they are. Oh,
Bar
yeah.
none, hands down. They're the most devoted fans out there, and they love their characters. And it's no surprise the love that they show art. Now, going back to art, you don't say a word in the movie. It's all done through body movement, and it's done brilliantly. Congratulations, you did a great job in pulling that
Thank you.
off. Uh, as an actor, explain to us doing a role and being the lead of a movie where you have no lines and everything has to be conveyed through body movement and actions. Walk us through the challenges you face.
Well, the one thing I do enjoy is I don't have to memorize lines. Because I'm used to, especially when I've done like parts like Joker and stuff like that. I've had monologues, pages of monologues memorized. So it's just like, oh, this is nice. I just show up on set for the day, and I'm like, what do I do today? They're like, oh, you just do this. Okay, great. Yeah, it's that's been a great aspect of it. I'm like, but another thing I had to really do is not utilize my main skill set, which is my voice, because I am a voice actor. I do over 200 voices and dialects and all that kind of crazy stuff. So like every character I've played before, I usually start with the voice first and develop the character off of the voice. And I didn't have that luxury with art this time. But the good thing was, as I have a long history with silent film acting and that love for it. You know, I grew up watching a lot of the silent comedians back in the day, from everything from Chaplin all the way through like Rowan Atkinson and Mr. Bean.
Wow.
And I love that style of comedy, and I was able to perfect a lot of that over all these years I was doing children's theater, because children are into that physical comedy. And then when I toured with Grinch, I was the understudy for the Grinch, and our Grinch was Stephen Carl, who was most notable. The biggest role he is known for is playing Robbie Rotten on the show Lazy Town.
Yeah, I have three kids, so I know Robbie
Yeah,
Rotten. Yeah.
yeah. And Stefan, as you know, was a master at physical comedy and clowning. He actually studied that. And so he was able to really take me under his wing for 5 years and really help fine-tune my skills. And so I had that all there in my database in my head. And so when I was approaching certain scenes in the film, I was like, okay, so how would Stefan approach this thing? Because like art has got to be bigger than life in his approach to everything. It's like if he's grabbing a bottle of water, he just doesn't just casually just grab a bottle of water. He does some kind of like,
Yeah.
ooh, that's because that's what clowns do. They exaggerate everything. So, but I didn't want to go too overboard and campy with it. So that was the challenge, is trying to walk that fine line of being too campy and too comedic, and being not just boring.
Exactly.
I guess you could say. And there were times where Damien had to pull me back with that kind of stuff. So it was like, which was understandable, because I can think of a scene in one scene in particular is when I have Jenna tied up to the chair and I'm torching her with different instruments. We did so many different takes of all these different weapons and toys I had in that bag, and some things I was doing were like comedic bits. Like I was doing like the old Johnny Carson, golf swing bit with this rod that had a big, huge metal spike on it, and pretending I was going to whack her knee with it. It's like, well, yeah, this is funny, but maybe we don't need to be too comedic right now. This needs to be, more sinister and creepy. So, we had, but I had different takes and everything with that. So it was a fun challenge.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. And you're giving Damien a lot of options to pick from at the end of the day, because you do have all these different skill sets that you can offer. Now, Art, a lot of people may not know this, is a character that, like you mentioned, appeared in All Hallows Eve. It was a short. It was played by another actor at that time. So when you got the part, and this is a character that was portrayed already in a short film, what did it put any kind of pressure on you to try to mimic that, or try to play the same character the way it was played before? Or did Damien say, you know what, put that aside and give us your version of Art?
It was a little bit of both, because like the thing was, the original actor Mike Gianelli, who played Art, he didn't really have the background that I have in physical comedy, and that's one thing Damien wanted more of in this. And so basically what I did, and what Damien also encouraged me to do, is to look at his original performance and take the basics of what he did and then build upon that. So I say that Mike really set a good foundation for me, and I just built upon that. I added more of the physical aspect, especially a lot more comedic aspects to the character.
Okay. Now, one of the most memorable scenes, is when you're decapitating and you're slicing at it. You're just pulling it back, just really gruesome. How did you approach that scene and make it look and feel so realistic? An example of a kill where you made it look and for us as the audience feel so realistic?
A lot of that was just Damien's practical effect work. He did a great job with that because he had different layers to it, where he had like the just like a dull knife that I was just dragging across Mike Levy's neck, and then he built a little prosthetic so I could actually look like I was digging into it
Mm-hmm.
with the knife, and then he had the full on prosthetic that I actually got to slice right through with the knife and pull it off. And I kind of like that because I kind of thought of it as like he's making him into a human Pez dispenser with the whole pulling it back. And I only
Yeah.
had one shot at that with pulling the head off because we only had one
One
prosthetic.
prosthetic.
So that was kind of stressful there because like, oh, don't screw this up. And it just worked just perfectly. So that was fun. But another hard part was just trying like when you don't really think of it until I say it, but it's like when I'm stepping on the head and trying to pull the blade out, I had to, since it wasn't a completely solid head, it didn't have a actual skull inside of it, so it could smush, and I had
Mm-hmm.
to actually not smush the head. I had to make it look like it was still had a skull in there, keeping it solid. So I was like, that's kind of hard.
It's I love hearing all these little challenges you guys had to face, behind the scenes to make it and pull it off and look so
Oh yeah.
realistic.
Oh, it's the blood tubes. The blood tubes are the hardest things to deal with because they get clogged. Sometimes they spray too much or they don't spray enough, so you're having to constantly do so many takes with these stupid blood tubes. And I felt so sorry for Mike that night too because he didn't really bring a change of clothes, and so all that blood was going right down to his uniform, right down to his underpants and everything like that. Got his contact lenses, and it was like just miserable for him.
And Mike Levi, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. Let's talk about location setting. You guys filmed this, like you said, in wintertime. You had to face some pretty grueling conditions
Yes.
in that, abandoned factory. How difficult were just the environment that you worked in? How much
Oh.
harder did it make your job to perform?
It didn't really make it harder to perform, but it just wasn't the most fun environment to perform in. Like the building that we were in for most of the duration in New Jersey was had no heat and
Mm.
had no running water. And so that just had its own challenges there. We had to bring a space heater around with us and stuff like that. And it's just, and when you're covered in so much blood, it's just, I would have to basically take a horse bath and have bottles of water and kind of just sponge it off of me. And it got really cold that way. But
So the
you do what
conditions
you
were
got to.
very challenging.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. So not the most fun, especially that night for poor Catherine, because we shot that in January. That room had no heat in it, and it was
Oh.
about 20 degrees that night. So I know I was cold, but she's wearing nothing and has all this blood all over her that's making her even colder, and she's upside down too. So that was just miserable for her. She got sick from that actually.
Wow, wow.
Yeah,
She's a real trooper though for
yeah.
doing that. Now, along the lines of famous clown killers, there's a lot of them. Pennywise from It, and of
Hmm.
course we have real life killers like who was it, John Wayne Gacy, I believe, that like to dress up as clowns.
Yes.
Um, you think? I always tell my guests and people that history puts films and entertainment where they belong. Not film critics at the time of release.
Hmm.
Their opinion doesn't really matter. It's history. Look at all the amazing films that came out that were trashed, like The Thing and
Hmm.
so on, and now they're classics. You think, 20 years down the line, when people look back on art, and art might still be going strong in 20 years. Look at Michael Myers and
Yeah.
that character. Where do you think art's going to fall in regard to like killer clowns?
I am hoping he's going to beat Pennywise one day. It's just sheer brutality. I think especially with the kills, we're gonna knowing what's coming in part two and some of the ideas that we already have for part three is just like, oh my gosh, I'm hoping people are gonna think of us as starting a new generation of horror It's like kind of how like Freddy and Jason and Mike
Hmm.
Myers and Leatherface brought in a new generation after the Universal monsters.
Yeah.
It's like I hope that we're going to inspire a new line of characters as well.
Yeah.
And
Yep. I definitely see that. Now, the main promotion for this film is, like you said, word of mouth, and that's how it became popular, and it's still growing in popularity. Do you see that Terrifier? It's been out now for several years, but more and more people are catching on to this movie and franchise.
mhm.
I mean, is that becoming evident to you? Are you seeing a lot more fans flocking and becoming Terrifier fans?
Oh, definitely. I noticed that there was a difference at the conventions before. Like, well, first of all, I noticed a difference between when we before we released on Netflix and then after we released on Netflix,
Oh
we had
yeah.
a big, huge, boom. But there was also a difference between before the pandemic and after the pandemic because everybody was stuck at home for basically a year. So everybody's watching stuff and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's catching up on stuff that people told them they need to see. And so I think a lot of people were introduced to Terrifier during the pandemic, and that I think built up our base even more so. And so I saw a lot more fans going into the conventions this year than I was seeing at past ones. It's just been crazy, and I hope it keeps growing and growing and growing. It's just that's the wonderful thing about the internet now. It's like you things can just go boom in an instant,
Exactly.
as opposed to back in the day, like when for instance, when Nightmare on Elm Street first came out, it took a few years before
Mm-hmm.
people knew who Freddy Krueger was.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm going to share a story with you. One of our team members shared today that they watched Terrifier. For the first time they watched it was on an airplane through their mobile device. And the person next to them was in just sheer horror because you can't avoid to see, what the person next to you on a plane ride is watching. And they were
Yeah.
like, yeah. And I've heard a lot of those stories in regards to Art the Clown on subways. The best way if you want to clear out somebody next to you on a subway car, just put on Terrifier.
Yeah.
If they're not into horror, they're definitely gonna abandon that seat right next to you.
Oh, yeah.
So when it comes to shooting conditions, was there any real big differences in Terrifier 2 compared to Terrifier 1 in the location? Did you guys also shoot this in winter as well?
Yeah, we also shot this one in winter as well. But we had some better environments, I would say, this time. Some of them still not as great, like especially where we filmed the climax of the film. And it was a great location aesthetically, but practically it was not because they just didn't have heat in there. So we had to bring our own heaters and stuff like that with us. And it sucked, of course, more for my female co stars than it did for me. Oh, poor Lauren.
Do you think
But
Damien does that just to bring out more authenticity in the character?
maybe.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Oh, I would have put it past them either. It definitely adds to their discomfort.
So when did you find out that there was going to be a Terrifier 2?
Oh gosh, I think that was like shortly after we first came out. I mean, we had already been talking beforehand because we thought we had something cool. Like, well, we'll see how it goes, but we're like, we think there need to be more of these films. I think. And then we saw the reaction it first started getting, and we're like, "Oh wow, this is bigger than we thought. We definitely have to do a part two." And so Damien got to start writing, immediately on it, and it just sucks that it's taken so long to get part two out. But it's COVID kind of
Yeah.
hampered a lot of that. So
But Damien, well, he's told me, I think it's okay to share that it's all done.
hmm
Now it's a matter of just cutting it and getting it out there. So I know
yeah,
there's no official date for a release, but hopefully we'll be getting it very soon. What
yes.
would you say that you're allowed to say uh, that we should be really excited about in the second one?
Well, I will say for one is like we have not pulled back with the kill scenes at all. I think we're pushing the envelope even more in part two because we're like
Nice.
let's go for it. Let's because that's the thing. It's like we didn't want to detract from what we had already done in part one. We want to keep everything what everybody loved about it, and one of the big things people love about part one is the brutality of the kills.
Yeah.
And so we're like, let's go further with these. So we start the film off with a very violent kill. I'm pretty sure we would probably get an NC-17 rating just for that first kill in the movie, and we don't let up. It's just this. It's a longer movie too. It's clocking it over 2 hours right now,
Yeah,
and there's
Damien
really
told
nothing.
us. Yeah, like 2 hours and 15 or 2 hours and 20. Yeah.
And there's really nothing we can really cut without it hampering the film because everything's connected. So it's like, oh well, people are used to longer movies now anyway. You go and see a 3.5 hour Marvel movie, so hey. The big thing is, you keep the audience engaged and entertained, and that's what we're doing in this. And so it's a fun, crazy movie. We have our little lulls in there just so people can catch their breath, but it's constantly going. It's like there's I would say the last third of the movie is just one roller coaster ride. It's once it starts going, it does not relent until the very end. The credits roll. It's crazy.
I can't wait. Now, putting art aside for a second, what has this done for your acting career outside of Art the Clown? Are you getting more offers? Are you auditioning for different roles? What has Terrifier done for your career?
It's definitely opened some more doors for me. I've gotten to do some more films and that kind of nature. I mean, I'm doing this a new film with a lot of the Terrifier team called Stream.
Yes.
With a lot of horror legends as well in that, like Dee Wallace,
Danielle Harris, Wallace,
Tony Todd, Jeffrey Combs, Dave Sheridan, Felissa Rose. So many awesome people that I grew up watching, so it was an honor to be on set with those actors. And so, it's like work begets work, and I'm hoping Terrifier 2 will just put us all on the map even more so.
Absolutely. It's gonna because of Terrifier the first one, there's gonna be a big flock when the movie releases. Whether it's theatrical or straight to video on demand, it doesn't matter. People are gonna flock to this thing the day it releases or right in the first opening days that it comes out. David, I want to thank you so much for being our guest and just sharing with us the inside tidbits on Art the Clown. Do you know where your next convention is?
Yes, I'm going to be doing Days of the Dead next weekend, the 19th through the 21st in Chicago.
Nice. So you're traveling the country doing these conventions.
I've been traveling a lot. I think Chicago is going to be my last one for the year. I might do one more in December. I'm not sure yet, but starting in February next year, I start doing them all over again. So I'm even going international next year. I'm going to England at least.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm very excited.
I'm very happy that conventions are back in person again.
Oh, me too. I just got my booster shot the other day too, so I'm super immune now.
You're ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Thank you for being on our show. Thank you for bringing us Art the Clown and the way that you brought us Art the Clown. For true horror fans out there, it is a true treat to watch what you do on the screen. And Damien, he's a genius with what he came up with. I mean, he's great. He knows how to really push the right buttons when it comes to horror. So he's definitely a horror genius when it comes to putting this stuff together. And all of you guys, Catherine, Samantha, you're a wonderful team. And, you know, the chemistry that a cast crew has off the camera, it really does show itself in front of the camera. And I think that's another factor to the success of Terrifier. You described you guys as a family, and that really came through, you know, in the movie as well, and I'm sure it's going to come through in the second one. So any final thoughts you want to share before we go?
Oh gosh. If you want to follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you can find me on there under David Howard Thornton. And I also have a Cameo page as well, David H. Thornton, I believe, on there. So if you have a birthday or something like that coming up you want to do for somebody, you can find me on there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hire Art the Clown. That will scare the shit out of
Yeah,
people.
yeah, your very own birthday clown.
I want to thank our audience for tuning in tonight. Again, thank you to David. On behalf of David and myself, stay safe, guys, and stay walking. Good night.